guys. Gosh, it's been a while, and also not a while at all because time hasn't been passing lately. Today we're looking at a game called Dice Legacy, and this is a dice-based strategy game. It's pretty interesting. It's a real-time strategy where there's a chance element in the dice rolls. It's pretty complicated. So what I thought this video would be is a quick explanation of how to play the game because that is definitely not very intuitive when you begin. And then we'll look at gameplay, how to optimize your game, and how to get the most enjoyment out of this. Now, I'm playing on the Switch version, which I very much do not recommend. This is a PC game through and through, which has been made to work on the Switch. And the Switch is, with button controls, it is acceptable. But it could be so much better if you had mouse and keyboard controls, right? So we're making the most out of the situation that we have. I'm going to start a new slot here. This game has lots of different scenarios, but you need to complete this first one, which is called Stranded, to unlock them all. Stranded is something of just like a tutorial scenario, but it is also pretty hard. You've got your cast of characters to play as well, and you start with just this Stranded King. You can see that there's already a lot of symbols, a lot of things that don't necessarily mean anything to a player that's just beginning, and the tutorial is not very good at explaining all of this, so hopefully this video is going to help clarify what we're looking for when we start playing this game. Now, we get this quick summary of what this character can do, and he starts with 5 peasant dice, which are these orange ones. And each dice effectively represents a member of your population. So if you're playing a normal RTS, you'll be familiar with the pop cap. You need to build houses, and people can live in them, and you can make whatever unit you want, right? So you can make a gatherer or a villager, or you can make a soldier or an archer. This game, one dice is one human being. And depending on what class that dice is, they have different abilities they're able to do. And we can quickly see in the symbols that we've got here, the peasant dice has 1 gears, 2 axes, 1 hammer, 1 sword, and 1 compass. And each of these abilities represents something that this individual can do. And when you roll that symbol, you're allowed to place that symbol onto the map and have them perform that task. Otherwise, you can roll them again until you get the symbol that you want. Now, each of these symbols represents something important for the development of a settlement or a colony. I find that they make a lot of sense in real-world logic. They don't make as much sense in game logic. So once you understand why things are the way they are, then you can start developing strategies. Otherwise, you're just going to be so confused and lost. And each of these symbols represents a different thing. The gears, in my mind, represents some kind of skilled labor. So farming or salvaging tends to be gears. The axe and the pickaxe are manual or strength-based labor. So wood cutting, mining, those are all the axe. The hammer is building, so that's only used if you want to build a structure. The sword is fighting, so that's used when you want to repel an enemy or you want to destroy an enemy settlement. And the compass has to do with orienteering, but also knowledge of the land. So when you build a new outpost that can explore new territory, you need a compass. When you want to forage for herbs, you need a compass. So those are the main symbols that appear here. You can also then upgrade your peasant dice into other classes, and they will have further symbols. We will talk about that when we see it. So gosh, that's already a lot of information to handle. We're going to jump straight into this game now. We're going to disable the tutorial because it pops up a lot, and it's a lot of reading and it's not very useful. The text size in this game is also quite embarrassingly small. When they ported it from the PC version, I'm sure they didn't really think about how big the words are going to be on a handheld Switch screen, so that's the one more thing you need to deal with. There's 5 difficulty modes. There's Pacifist, which is just for building a colony. There's Standard, which has a little bit of combat in it. There's Legacy, which doesn't let you pause, which makes it a real survival experience. And then that's not even the hardest one. There's Hard, so there's fewer resources. And then there's Extreme, which I have not even bothered to try yet because I know I will not succeed. We're just going to try Standard, so I can show the flow of the game and what kinds of challenges you face. You'll also see that this character has a special ability or a wager ability. This activates whenever you get that particular combination of symbols in your dice pool. So as long as you get 2 hammers, 2 axes, 2 gears, that happens automatically. You actually have no control on when you want to activate it. And it can be useful sometimes, to be honest. I haven't really planned around it. The effect that this character gives is really useful, but I've just never been in a situation where I've used it. So we will jump straight into the game. The really interesting thing about the world of this game, actually, is that it's not set on a globe planet. Instead, it's set on this cylindrical thing. So I don't know if anyone's seen like sci-fi films, not spoiling any specific sci-fi films, where there's space colonies and they have artificial gravity by rotating because they're this giant ring and you live on the inside of this ring. This game is kind of like that. I explained it very terribly. But the way that this world is designed means that you can actually scroll upwards and downwards, and your colony begins at the very bottom, and mild spoilers, the enemy colony is at the very top. So you can scroll all the way up and back down. I'm going to immediately pause the game to explain the main mechanics because time is, well, it's real time and it does not let up. You need to be using your time wisely. So we're going to look at the various things that are surrounding the screen. I know the UI is very bothersome. Top left, you've got your speed controls. That's just how fast you want the game to go. Here, you've got the 8-ish main resources of the game, and each one is collected in different ways and affects your colony in different ways. They don't really make very clear when you should be getting which resource, so this is a quick explainer. Food is really important to keep your dice healthy, so you want to stockpile food as well as you can. This game follows a seasonal system, so here in the bottom left, you can see this little bar, and to the left it's blue, to the right it's yellow. At the very start of the round, you go through a period of summer and then a period of winter. And in winter, it becomes very, very hard to get food. So you want to stockpile food as much as you can. This next one is, I can't see it very clearly, but I think that's wood. Wood is useful for making buildings. Wood is useful for, I think that's it really, making buildings. That's all you use with it. Stone is useful for advanced buildings, so very similar RTS logic. Buildings that require specialist abilities are going to need stone. This one is gold. Gold is really specialized research, and I think you only come across it incidentally by mining, so you can't really rely on having access to gold. Iron is useful for upgrading your dice and your units. Iron is also very important for military, so it helps you create soldiers or soldier dice, and it also is just generally useful for when you want to start taking over the enemies. This one is wheat. Wheat is created through wheat fields. It is only creatable in summer, so it's completely inaccessible in winter in normal conditions. Wheat can be used to make food. It can also be used to make the next resource, which is ale. Ale is not that important. Ale is a very optional resource. You can choose to make ale if you want out of your wheat, and ale can help you address winter, which we'll get to. And lastly, we have herbs. Herbs are very useful because herbs can heal units that have been hurt by combat. I know that's already an information dump, but we're not even all the way through. This last one here is knowledge, and that it manages your research. That one's, we talk about that later because you're not going to be able to get knowledge very early in the game. On the very right side, this bar is kind of like a mini-map. So you see the arrows scrolling when we go up and down. That shows us what part of the map we're looking at. And whenever we build a colony outpost, we'll see that as a dot on our side, and when enemy forces are coming down from the top, we can see them as a red dot coming down as well. And so that's very useful to get a sense of, are there any threats in your colony? Do you need to be aware of anything? It's a quick way to spot where problems are arising. I didn't even know this was a mini-map until my second run, so it is very useful. Okay, so on the very bottom, you've got your dice pool. These are the representations of your members of your colony. You can roll them with L, you can lock them with R, like in Yahtzee. So if you have a symbol which you know you will need, but you don't need at the moment, you can lock it, which means it doesn't get rolled again. I like to, once enemies start attacking, I like to make sure that I have at least one sword locked, so that I can immediately address the enemy with my own soldier when I need to. You have a max of 12 units in your dice pool, so you can create as many as you require. Here on the bottom left, you have your character, you have the symbol of your special ability, and you also have this timer which shows what season it's about to be. So we are going to have a few, I think it's months, I'm not actually sure. A few months of summer, and then a few months of winter. And winter in this game is brutal. So you'll see that the first period of summer, I am basically spending my entire time preparing for winter. In the left side, we have our society classes, I guess that's what you call it. So you have peasants, you have merchants, soldiers, citizens, monks. I think that's the five. And each group in society has a bar to symbolize how happy they are. And if they're very happy, they work better, they give you better outcomes when they do certain tasks. And if they're unhappy, depending on which class it is, there will be adverse effects. So I think if peasants are unhappy, they'll start setting your buildings on fire. If citizens are unhappy, they'll start going on strike and refusing to work. If soldiers are unhappy, they'll just start punching people in the street. So make sure that you perform tasks and keep each class of society safe so that they are happy, and they are doing what you need them to do. You start at the very bottom with just about no buildings. You have the town hall, which you can't build. It's just the symbol of your survival. If it gets destroyed, then you lose. You also have, in construction, a cookhouse. This is a very important building because this allows you to restore the durability of your dice. Every time you roll a dice, the number on the bottom of it, so here they all say 16, they go down. And when they get to 0, that dice is permanently destroyed. So you need to be putting the weakened or used up dice into the cookhouse, giving it some food, and that will replenish the durability of that dice to 16. You want to have these buildings generally scattered around so that whenever you need to replenish a dice, you can do that because you really don't want to lose any of the dice. We have natural resources all around here. So here on the bottom left, we've got food crates and wreckage from the ship that we've landed on. This is a nice boost at the very start just to get your resources up. We've also got hunting grounds where you can use axes to gather food. We've got forests where we gather wood. And here we've got a stone mine, I believe, and the further we go, the more different kinds of buildings we'll encounter. These ones are all limited, so you'll see that red number in the box over there next to the name of the location. That's how many times you can gather from it before it gets used up. And because these resources are all perishable, that means as you go upwards, you'll need to keep advancing, otherwise you'll just run out of resources. So I think that's just about everything we need to do. Let's start the game and start assigning some of our dice to resources. I tend to like making sure that we always have food production because it's always good to have excess of that, and having some people on wood. You won't need swords or compasses for a little while, so just feel free to roll them away. We want to keep using our axes. We want to make sure that this cookhouse is getting built, and compass we don't need at the moment, we can roll that away. We've got one more axe, so we'll send this one to... We don't really need the stone mine at the moment, so we'll go for wood again. Whereas in most RTS games, you want to make sure that you are not floating resources. In this game, floating resources is exactly what you want to do because of the winter period. You must make sure that you are not at 0 for any of your main resources, so food or wood or stone, because if you run out, then things are bad. Now, once your villager has done their task, they'll come back, and they'll be grayed out, which means that they can't be sent to another thing. You need to roll them again to get them ready to work. So here we'll roll them all again, and you'll see that the durability of each one goes down by 1 for every time they get rolled. These are all pretty healthy though, so we don't need to worry too much about that. We will start building. So the first thing I'm going to build is a house, and this is a fairly important building in the early game because it allows you to put 2 dice in it to create a new child dice. Don't think about that too much. And that's important for filling out our population because we want to make sure that our workers are always busy. So you don't want any dice idled. You want to make sure that all your dice are being assigned to something so that you are having a persistent income. You need to make sure that you are in a really stable position in the first summer because otherwise the winter will come and you will have a really hard time advancing if you are not ready for it. That's what happened in my first playthrough, is when winter hit, I was so surprised at how limited I was being because I didn't prepare for it. Whereas if you know what's going to come, then you know what to do. We want to make sure that all of our resources are well addressed. We want to get as much wood and as much food as we can in this early stage of the game. It doesn't matter if we float, it's just good to make sure that we have an excess because we will absolutely need the excess. We have 2 builders. We're going to make a wheat farm. There are a lot of potential buildings in this game, so it's good to get a sense of what you will need at each point. Wheat farms require 2 gears, villages, and they are extremely inefficient. They are very, very inefficient ways to get food, but they are the only way to get food once your hunting grounds run out, and they will run out very quickly. I just realized that we don't need that right now. It's better to put your gears towards these salvage points at the very beginning. These don't have many uses, they only have 2 or 3, so they run out very quickly. Going to make sure that our villagers keep getting assigned tasks. And also, before I forget, we should have this house going with 100% uptime. You want to keep making sure that our peasants are being continually created. So that's a mistake that I'm doing right now. This one's back. We will check these 2 villagers in the house. Takes 60 seconds to create a new one, but the more dice you have, the faster you can then make dice. So we want to round out our population as quickly and as efficiently as we can. Okay, so going to keep rolling till we get the symbols that we need. And here is where the chance comes into play. Sometimes you'll roll exactly the symbol that you need so you can allocate your workers efficiently. Sometimes you'll roll useless symbols. Like, for example, at the start of the game, swords are pretty useless, and compasses aren't very useful either, so you need to keep rolling them away and making sure that you are getting the symbols that you need. We want to make sure that we get gears and axes. We want to exhaust out these early things whenever we can, and you'll notice that you can build whenever you want. As long as you lay down the foundations, it just means that you need to eventually bring some builder villages to that structure. But otherwise, you can just plan for whatever time you want. Getting some dice back, and a few of them are getting a bit tired. You want to make sure that you don't roll dice that you could otherwise use, because you'll just waste their durability. This one is at 6, feeling risky, so I'm going to send them to work. Make sure that they are always busy, and make sure that the house is always running. This one's getting a bit low. We'll keep going. Now, eventually we will want to start advancing forwards to get more resources, but also to encounter the enemy to make sure that we can defeat them and win the scenario. But that's not for a little while. You see that the resources at the bottom are already getting used up. Okay, so this one can go there. This one we're going to re-roll. We have 2 gears, so we can send them to farm. Farms are so inefficient. Farms require 2 gears twice to create 4 wheat. And then that wheat can eventually get created to food, but that requires even more labor. Whereas if you just send a person to a hunting ground, you just need 1 die and they can create food. That easy. Okay, so this person's going to come back. We are going to need to chuck them into the cookhouse. And when you press A, it automatically gives whatever resource you need. You see that 1 food got taken from a resource and was added to the cookhouse. And now when this timer is up, that dice is going to come back to us with full durability. So when filling the houses, I like to use the symbols that I know that otherwise I won't need. You'll see also that the box underneath the house is orange, because only peasant dice, only orange dice can be placed into that structure. There are upgrades that let you put any type of dice into the house, but for now we can only put peasants there. Okay, we're going to put some people towards a stone mine too, because that will allow us to get more specialized villagers, and we will make sure that we are feeding everyone so they don't die of starvation, I guess. I'm going to keep going, keep rolling. It's a bit risky to use that since they're only at 3, but just keep going with that. And there's also a speed up, so if you want to go forward faster, you press up or down on the D-pad, and that can advance time. I wish there was a way to remap the controls on Switch, because they are not very intuitive at all, especially because the left and right triggers scroll up and down, and the up and down D-pad buttons scroll the time forwards and backwards. It just doesn't feel right to me. It takes a bit of time to get used to the controls, and I've been making so many mistakes as I was learning. This too absolutely needs to get refilled, and now it's time to expand our territory. What we can do is, in Essential, these are the main buildings that are very important. We've got a house, we've got a cookhouse, we've got a district hall, and a school is a building which lets us upgrade peasant dice into different classes of society. A citizen dice has new abilities that let us advance further in the detectory. But we're going to build a district hall. These are what you build when you want to expand your territory. You see that we need to assign 2 hammers to this building, and then they will complete on its own. We're going to make sure that our villagers are getting fed, and actually, I might just... Oh, we can't because we don't have wood. Okay, we need to prioritize getting wood. Especially for the first winter, you are going to need a lot of wood. So don't be shy about just mining these forests dry. You're really going to need it. Here we're going to assign our gears to the wheat farm. You'll see that the first 2 villages tilled it, so now it's got rows of seeds, and we need 2 more worker villages to then grow the wheat, and then another 2 more to harvest it. It's very, very inefficient. Okay, we've got more people coming back. Now you'll see that we need a compass to advance this district hall. We don't have one in our set at the moment, so we're just going to keep rolling until we eventually get one. Going to make sure our house is also operational. Going to chuck this 3 into the cookhouse, and there we go, we've got a compass. So once this is finished, we will explore more of the territory beyond us. Okay, when I keep rolling, a bit risky to use this one. Another thing you can do too is that if you don't want a dice to die and it's low on vitality, you can lock it so you can roll the other ones without reducing the durability of the one that's a bit weaker. You can see that the wheat field has grown out now. Do we want to build anything? Can we build anything? We cannot build anything. We are still short on wood. Just going to keep rolling. I'm going to lock a builder because we are going to want to build something soon. I'm going to keep replenishing our durability because we don't want to lose any dice right now. Okay, I'm going to keep assigning, lock that. Those 2 can be re-rolled. Alright, I think we have maybe almost enough resources. We want 6 wood, waiting for these guys to finish their work. We can take a look at what buildings are available. Each tab has something to do with a different class of society. So essential is just creating more peasants. Production has to do with resources. So taking basic resources like wheat or wood or food and making them specialized. Here we end up producing knowledge that allows us to make research. Welfare is all about treating sick villages. There's lots of problems that can happen to your villages, and it's really good to have resources to fix that. Or you can just let them die, depending on what kind of player you are. Going further, manipulation is about really high-level technology. You'll see that all of these are locked already. Military is about fighting, creating dice that have better sword values. You'll need these towards the end of the game to win. Economy is about merchants. I have never really played with merchants yet. I'm not too sure what their purpose is. Religion is about monks and converting enemies. These are pretty good all-rounders, but they're very hard to get to. They're very resource-intensive. We're going to build a school. So we are going to convert regular citizens into... regular peasants into citizens. We're going to educate them, we're going to make them cultured, we're going to help them work more efficiently. Okay, so now here, we're going to chuck our useless things, our swords. Ooh, okay, so that is our notification that it's time for winter. And winter sucks. Winter requires so much effort. First thing we're going to build in winter is, I realized I've already made a mistake because we need 3 iron to build a steam generator. And the purpose of the steam generator is to prevent our villages from getting frozen. I'm going to quickly pause the time here because we've just unlocked a few new things. Over here we've got a meadow, which you can send a villager to gather herbs. Over here we've got a stone mine, we know what that is. Here we've got more hunting grounds, so when the earlier ones get exhausted, we can move upwards. We've got our iron mine here, which can gather iron ore and also rarely gold. And we've got some encampments, so these people will... Well, these are NPCs, or if you played Civ, barbarians. And depending on how dangerous or how safe it is, we can send a compass dice to these and we'll get various outcomes. We might get resources, or they might try to attack us, we don't know. Going to start going again. We're going to make sure that we are collecting iron, because we're going to need a little bit of that in the future. Going to send to the stone mine as well, send to... we don't need the meadow just yet. Meadows are really only important for when your villagers get injured in whatever way. And combat can get them injured, the winter can get them injured. That's the main ways, I think. There's also sickness, which I don't really know how that happens. Maybe it has to do with the encampments, but haven't encountered that yet. Okay, so we've got a compass. Let's send a villager to this encampment, see how they treat us. And we're going to keep sending villagers to forest and hunting grounds. We want to max out our resources. Or, well, you can't, but you want to, like, stock up on them, because this winter is not going to mess around. Okay, an interesting discovery. We encountered a small encampment. Population is wearing worn out yet fancy clothes. They seem to possess a lot of goods. Unfortunately, our explorer was seen while trying to sneak into the camp and caught by a guard, though we worry our presence for a while. So, oof, that means our villager, our peasant, was wounded. You'll see that the dice is all cracked and broken. That means that if they were to get another wound, that dice will die, and we won't have access to it anymore. So, what you can do is you can use your wounded dice to do only safe tasks, tasks that have no chance of giving it a wound. So you can use it for woodcutting or mining or anything like that, and basically not be afraid. You'll just want to be very wary of sending that dice to anything military based. Anything where they can get injured, right? And the way that you would cure wounds is through the apothecary, a word that I have a hard time pronouncing. It requires herbs, and it can then remove wounds. Herbs are only gained from the environment. So we've got lots of floating dice because they haven't been very efficient. Going to make sure that all of our symbols are being put to good use, and also no one is dying from hunger. You will benefit from building a cookhouse or two just as you develop, because it can get tedious to scroll all the way to the bottom to make a new one. But also, it's just good to have one on hand. As your population gets bigger, you will need more and more of these. I'm going to gather a few herbs, because they can be useful. And I realized too that wheat is not useful until you have a mill, which we can't afford. One more thing too is I want to make sure that we have our steam generator so that we are ready for the winter. People are getting real hungry though, so I want to make sure that our resources are well stocked up. The good thing right now is that we have lots of food, and that's a mistake that I made my first playthrough, is I did not plan how much food my society would need. This time I am more than happy to float. I'm more than happy to have a stockpile, because no, your resources don't expire, they don't go away. As long as you have them in your inventory, you can use them on whatever you need to do. Okay, gonna make sure that everyone's well assigned. You can see winter is very close. Winter is coming very close. So we need to wait for this guy to finish before we can even make that steam generator. This is getting a bit risky. This is cutting a bit close right now. I also like to... okay. So at the end of each season, you will reconvene with the council, and you'll get to decide what kind of law you want to impose in a region. These are randomly generated from a large deck, and you get to choose between 3. One that has this wax seal means that it's a little bit rarer, but overall you pick what perk is going to be useful for you. Sharing experience means all newly created dice have 1 extra power to physical labor. That's really, really good. That is very good. Firewatch means buildings inside peasant districts are immune to fire. You'll notice that some of these are basically contingencies. So this one, the peasant district, it would only catch on fire if it was being set on fire by enemies, or if you'd really screwed up your management of your city. So it's basically worthless. And this last one, dice are immune to freeze while used in peasant districts. This is actually pretty useful. So I'll explain what all of that means in just a second. But freeze happens in winter, which we are in at the moment. If your dice are working outside, or you just roll them and it's winter, they have a small chance to freeze. And when they freeze, they do not thaw until summer, which means the length of time that we just spent in summer that dice is out of commission. They're not dead, they're just unusable. And you can cure freeze by using the ale house, but that's very resource intensive. You need to spend wheat to make ale to then use on your villagers. Not really worth it. Or you can just wait it out, right? And you can be ready to have very reduced production during your winter period. Now, that perk that I just got, what you can do is you can make any district hall into a class district hall by putting in a class die. So here we can put in a peasant die, and then we also need 2 gold. We don't have 2 gold. The way that you get gold is by doing a lot of iron mining, and you will occasionally come across some gold, and we don't have that. So our alternative is to build a steam generator, which we cannot afford because it's worth 5 iron, and I thought we needed 3, so we need to keep mining and risk getting frozen. One complaint I have about this game is that the buildings all look fairly similar. It's kind of hard to tell what is what at a glance, especially because the symbols on Switch are so small. And so, especially when the snow effect starts happening, and the snow looks really cool, but it's hard to figure out what's what, and you'll spend a lot of time scrolling back and forth to make sure that you're putting your dice in the right positions. It can be useful to plan your town in a way that you know where everything is going to be. You may want to have some kind of system, like you put the cookhouses on the left, right, or you put the class buildings on the right, or just something so that you know where everything's going to be. Otherwise, you're going to spend forever going, hey, I built a school, where did I put my school? Speaking of schools, we can now make some dice into citizens. So we need a peasant dice and 2 food. I'm not worried about using my food because we've got lots of them. You'll notice though that our wheat farm is now out of order because it's winter and wheat doesn't grow in winter. We have 4 wheat, which is very much not a lot. I'm going to build this steam generator now. You want to build it somewhere nice and central. And we've got to roll for some builders. That was very inefficient of me. I wasted so many symbols doing that. I'm going to send some folks to work. Okay, so now we've got our citizen die. And our citizen die has different symbols. It has a stop time. Has a gear. On the very left, you see that little 2 on the bottom right corner of the gear, and that means it's worth 2 of the amount of skilled labor that a single one would be worth. So remember how we need 2 citizens or 2 peasants to run this wheat farm. If we roll that gears with a 2 on the bottom right, we only need 1. So that's very useful. And at the far right, we see that it has 2 books. These are knowledge, and these are required in the workshop. So here in the production screen, you can put in books and receive knowledge as a resource in the top right. I think they're called the same thing, which is kind of frustrating. But then you can go to the upgrade menu by hitting minus, and here you can get small upgrades for your civilization. There's so many to go through. You can increase production. These are pretty useful because you get more out of a limited resource. You can improve certain parts of your society, so cookhouses are stronger, or a reduced vulnerability to fire, or you have better research. You also need to spend resources in going up ages, just like in Age of Empires. You want to spend some resources to go to refined technologies, and that unlocks further tiers down the tree. This can take a long time. Some matches of this game can go for upwards of 2 hours because there's just so much to do and so much to research. We're not going to spend that much time this time. I think what I'm going to do is just get through this winter and show what combat looks like, and then we will just call it a day, because this video has already gone pretty long. It's gone a lot longer than I thought it would be, because explaining this game takes a long time. I'll show what happens if you screw up, actually. So you'll see this die is at 1. If you roll it again, it's 0. And if you roll it again, it just dies. So you'll see that the happiness of my peasants has taken a hit. It's because they don't like it when they see their friends get overworked. But also, we lose resources for our colony, which means that all that time we spent in the house developing a new villager, that's all wasted now. We see the snow effect is pretty cool, and the lighting effect's pretty cool too. I do quite like the graphics of this game. Okay, so that person that we sent to the forest has now been frozen, which means that the dice is grayed out and white. That means if we roll them, nothing happens. And if you want to put them to work, nothing happens. And you can see on the bottom left that we've got a lot of winter ahead of us, and this grayed out dice is unusable for the entirety of winter unless we build a brewery. So we can make some ale from wheat, and then we need to take that ale to a tavern, and then finally we can get rid of the freezing effect. It's not really worthwhile, so I'm not going to be building that. Instead, we're just going to make do with what we have. So we floated our resources, right? This thing has not finished building yet because I was a fool and I didn't assign all the villagers. But what this does is it creates a small radius in which work can be done and your dice are not vulnerable to freezing. Ooh, we got another peasant that froze in a stone mine. This way you can keep everyone at work in winter. Otherwise, in winter, the only real thing you can do is just wait it out. And that gets very dangerous when you've got an enemy on the other side of this map that is getting stronger while you aren't. Okay, we're going to keep rolling, and what I'll do is actually, I will just speed things up a bit, because it's not that much to show anymore. Here, the steam generation eats 3 wood, which is pretty expensive, and once it's turned on, it will give this white radius around it protection from freezing for this amount of time, so you can actually see the snow begin to melt, which is a pretty cool effect. I want to make sure that everyone's fed and clothed so that we don't die. We're not going to produce any more peasants. The main thing you want to do in winter is just be very, very frugal with your resources so that you don't lose villages and you can make whatever production you need to, but you prepare for when summer comes back, because that's when things are going to really start booming. I'm going to fast forward this time. And you'll also notice that if you don't use villages, right, if you don't roll your dice, then they don't reduce in the durability at all. You can just keep them the same however you like. And the only downside is that we are not really advancing our colony at the moment. We're not building anything, we're not getting stronger. So we are going to be more vulnerable if there were enemies that were attacking us right now. You can see that the winter is slowly scrolling by. The winter in this game is very long. And if I was sending villagers to any of these work spots, they're more at risk of being frozen as well. And if they're frozen, they're just screwed. There's nothing you can do about them. We'll just try to get everyone well fed. Make sure that you are doing the best that you can. Making sure that you are working if you feel like it's safe to work. Wow, that's a very sad sentence that I just said. And we can see that there's a little bit of green on the horizon, so we will be safe to expand and our wheat will start growing again and everything will be good. Snow is going to start melting. One thing you do have to be careful of is when you see the season change about to happen, do not hit the A button, because you will go to the council and you may enact a law that you don't want to enact. So just be very careful around this time and wait for the menu to appear now. So winter has passed, snow is gone, weather is getting warm again, we made it through our first winter. Now it is time to move forward and discover what lies ahead. And we get to the council. So what are our choices? Workshop requires 1 less knowledge. That's not bad, actually. That means that we can start getting research resources with 1 fewer citizen die. That's not too bad. All newly obtained die have 1 extra power to mining, and at the start of every season obtain 2 wheat for every wheat farm inside peasant districts. This one is very dependent on you having a peasant district, and we don't, so let's go for precision tools. I'm going to keep... Oh, that's the wrong one. That's what I'm saying. It's like all the buildings look similar enough that you keep accidentally sending people into the wrong building. This one is the school. I'm going to start sending people into the school, getting them well educated. Making citizens is quite food dependent, so if that's what you're planning to do, you may want to have a bit of surplus. Make sure that you're producing more food than you need, so that you can then make these villages into citizens. And it's the same process for each of the other classes of society. So if you were to build a barracks, and we could just build a barracks now, we will be getting attacked soon. Want to make sure that we can roll our hammers. And this will allow us to convert our orange peasant dice into blue soldier dice. They have better symbols for attack. looking at our resources, we have a bit of everything. We do have gold from somewhere or something. I'm always not sure of where my gold come from because it is a randomness-based resource. What we can do is, here is our district hall. We can put in a peasant dice and we can spend 2 gold, and that converts this into a... You need to be a bit accurate with where you're putting your dice. Yep, there we go. And this will convert it into a district hall, which will improve the happiness of this class and also make that specific type of dice in that area work a bit more efficiently. We're also going to build... Ooh, can't afford it because we need wood. I'm going to send our people to work first. You can also see at the left side of the screen here, you get a quick overview of how many dice you have in total. So that way you get a sense of how many are working and how many are idle in your inventory. You'll see that I triggered my character ability because I happen to have the collection of symbols required. That happened automatically, none of my dice were frozen, that had no positive benefit on me, and now it needs to cool down. So I don't really know about that aspect of this game's mechanics. It seems a bit odd to me. A bit underutilized, I guess. If there was some kind of specific button to activate it when I really needed it, that would be better. Okay. It's a bit of a lack of cookhouses. I'm managing the durability of my dice a lot worse in this run. Normally, you really need to concentrate, make sure you're aware of where you're putting your dice. We've got our barracks built, so we can start sending our peasant dice and 2 iron to start converting them into soldiers. And let's see, anything else we need? We do need a mill, because otherwise our wheat is useless. We need to convert it to something. We don't have enough stone for it, so we'll just wait it out. We are also completely out of food, so we want to make sure that we are utilizing these hunting grounds as well as we can. Okay, so there's our first soldier dice. If you can roll it a few times, you'll get this sword with a 2, and I like to just lock it there because that's where it's most useful. Sometimes when enemies start coming down from the top, then you will need to defend yourself, so having a few of those on hand is very useful. Otherwise, soldiers aren't that great. You can see they have 3 sword symbols, 1 build symbol, and 2 torch symbols, and that means that a lot of tasks that are required around the colony, like gathering resources, the soldiers just can't do, because they're just not able to do that. You'll also see that now we have 3 classes of society. We need to balance 3 different happiness quotients. We want to make sure that we are making everyone happy. We are not accidentally pissing off any group of society because they will sabotage our colony. We also see too that here we've got our little gold symbol. That means we've got our first district hall here, and then when the second one gets built and explored with our compass, we'll get another gem on our minimap, and then we can see scrolling up. Okay, so we see our first enemy moving towards us as well. And the game should notify us. There we go. Shadowy figures. So a terrified peasant screams for help. Something is attacking our settlement. Who and why? Rumors quickly spread about the others. We are not alone. Some pale, slender figures appear from the mist. They move quickly through the shadows and are approaching our supplies. We must stop them from stealing our resources. These things are just the same thing as a resource gathering spot, right? But they take a sword. And if you don't do anything, they'll slowly move down, and once this circle fills, they will start attacking our buildings. And I'm pretty sure that once this number counts down to 0, then they will have destroyed our building. So you want to assign any sword token to this, and they'll fight and they'll destroy it. And the sword will come back. They may or may not get wounded in that process. So as the level develops, you'll get more and more of these enemies coming from the top, and they will start to threaten you and your colony. You want to make sure that you defeat them. Eventually, you can build more and more of these district halls to advance all the way to the top, and then you will see the source of the attacks is an enemy colony. You will need lots of sword symbols to defeat all their buildings. But I think that's been enough time. This is how to build your base in Dice Legacy. Forgot the name of the game there. And the main purpose of all these dice and buildings, it's a pretty complex game. It takes a lot of planning to work out well, and while it's not a very micro-intensive game, you do have to have a lot in your head at the same time. So I would recommend it to anyone who likes this kind of organization of their base. If they're good at tracking lots of different resources and they like to create bases and colonies in RTS games, this is a game that really sells that fantasy of getting a nice society of people from different classes and putting them all to use and developing your society in a certain way, and then eventually going to destroy an enemy. So yeah, that's been Dice Legacy. Thank you for joining with Harvard Place. Hopefully this has been useful if you pick up this game and you're not sure about the mechanics. Hopefully this has explored all this game has in store. There's lots of new mechanics and scenarios that will continue to test you as well. I've just shown the very first one, but there's 5 difficulty modes, different characters, different maps, lots of things to do. So I highly recommend it if you are into RTS games. It just is a bit of a learning curve. Okay, and I will see you next time.